In this lecture, we're going to be learning how to use the different blur tools in Photoshop. So first off, let's start off with just the generic blur tool. So you can see over here we have a raindrop shape over here on the side. That's our blur tool in Photoshop, and there should be something similar in all other softwares. And what we can do with this is we can basically just blur our image. So right now I have the option of sampling layers turned on, and what this does is it allows me to add a new layer above my image, and then I can blur it, but it won't actually affect the original image. So I'll show you what I mean. So on this new layer, I'm going to go ahead and blur her eye. Now you're going to have to do layer after layer to really get it to blur out. The blur tool is not necessarily a very strong tool. It just slightly blurs the eye, so you have to basically draw a few lines of layer of blur on top of that eye for it to really blur out. But now you can see that our eye is a little bit more blurry, and we'll be able to see that even better if I zoom in there. And now you can see down here on this layer, we can see her eye, the area that I blurred out. I'm going to go ahead and turn that layer off, and you can see that now it's sharp and now it's blurry. And that's what the tool does, where we turn on sampling layers up here, is it allows us to basically put our blur on a separate layer without affecting the actual image. So we don't have an actual blurry image. We can turn that off and on as we like. All right. Now, one last thing about this is you can control the strength of it. So right here, you can see that you can control the strength. So if you turn that down, it'll blur less, but the blur tool is already so weak that I really don't ever use it on anything lower than 100%. All right, next, let's go to the sharpen tool. So the sharpen tool, let's go ahead and delete this layer so we can get a nice clean new layer and a new layer there. On the sharpen tool, same thing. We want to make sure that the sampling layers is turned on. And what we can do is let's turn the strength up to 100%. We can go ahead and sharpen the image. So if I do this around her eye, you can see it shows up down here in the layer. You can see her eye on that layer, and it's sharpening it up. So it's taking the information there, and it's just trying to do its best to sharpen the image. Now you don't want to use this too much, otherwise it'll distort the colors and make it look grainy. You can see I can use it out here on this eye, and it'll do its best to kind of sharpen it up so it's not in such a blurry out of focus area. So you can see that kind of sharpened that eye up. It looks like it's not as much out of focus as it was before. So if we go ahead and turn that layer off, you'll see the difference. It just looks a little bit sharper, a little bit less blurry, but you can also see that using it too much kind of distorts the colors a tiny bit and puts a lot of like kind of TV fuzz grain in there. So you don't want to use this tool too much. And again, you can change the strength just like you can on the other tools. Then let's go to the smudge tool. The smudge tool is basically the same. We can control the strength of it right here. And we can also turn on sample layers, and that's just going to allow you to paint on a separate layer. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete this layer so we have a nice clean new layer, add a new one. And now let's go ahead and let's give this tool a shot. So I have the strength turned up to 83%, and you can see that what I can do is I can go ahead and just smudge the image. So I can smudge her nose out like that, for example, or I can smudge her lip down. Now you might want to use this on an even larger scale. So if I really turn this up to a really big size, I can really smudge a big portion of her face. Give that a minute to load. When you do large areas like that, it can take a little while for it to compute it. So we'll give it a minute to load. But what should happen is this whole area of her face should kind of get smudged down a little bit, and you can use that to really manipulate a large area of your image. All right, let's go ahead and let's turn that layer off, see what that did. So you can see that her eye, even though we didn't like do a crazy warp like we did on her nose or her lips, you can see that just by turning off our actual blur layer, it needs a minute to load, there we go. If we turn off our blur layer, there's a big difference. So we completely moved this whole area of her face downwards. All right, so that's the smear tool, and once again, you can control the strength of it just like the other ones. Next, let's go over the mixed brush tool. So the mixed brush tool is a really useful tool for blending. So it's kind of like a blur tool, but it also kind of works like a paintbrush. It's almost like as if you were to take some sort of a clear medium when you're oil painting in real life and just kind of using it to blend colors together on top of your painting. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete this layer and add a new one. We have sample layers turned on, and I want to use a textured brush like the one I have right here, just so I kind of get a painterly effect. And let's go ahead and with everything at 100%, let's try a few things. So let's go ahead and let's just blur her nose like that. And as you can see, it's very strong right now. It's turned up really high. And so it's almost like as if the paint were wet of the image, and we can just go in there and just smear that around like that. So this is really good for blending in colors. but you really want to play around with the flow, the mix, the load, and the wetness. So let's go ahead and turn down the flow and see what that does. And then let's go ahead and turn down the mix. You'll be able to see that as you start to play around with these different settings, you're going to get different effects. Let's go ahead and control the wetness. We can turn some of these down even more. And you can see it just kind of softens it up a little bit when we turn some of these settings down. And if we bring our brush size down, we can go ahead and just use this nice and lightly. So you don't want to use this too much. You don't want to use this all the time to blend colors, but there are times where if you're blocking in your colors on your painting or something like that, you might want to go in there with this and just kind of smudge it around and really blend those together a little bit more. It's kind of like just having a wet medium when you're painting. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So what I want you to do is just go ahead and take one of your pieces of artwork or a photograph, whatever you want, and just play around with these 4 blur tools and see what kind of results you can get. Play around with the settings, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture.